The weeks after the council meeting were filled with unease. The stars seemed quieter, but that silence was heavy, like the air before a great storm. Rumors spread across the galaxy. Fleets were moving, supply ships were vanishing, and whispers of invasion filled every trade station. The Zorath Dominion had begun gathering warships along its border. Their heavy cruisers and dreadnoughts were ancient, built with layers of armor and weapons strong enough to destroy moons. Across from them, the Velari Collective answered with equal force, their sleek, dark fleets assembling in silent patterns like hunting birds. The two powers had hated each other for centuries, and now it seemed their hatred could no longer be contained. The Galactic Council met again and again, but little was decided. Delegates argued endlessly about peace terms, treaties, and sanctions. Voices rose, hands slammed on tables, and still nothing changed. Beyond their words, the fleets continued to grow. Elias Ward attended each meeting, calm as always. He never raised his voice, never allowed anger to break through his quiet mask. Other delegates took his silence as weakness. They whispered to each other, "Humans do not know what to do. Humans are afraid." But outside the council chamber, far from the eyes of the galaxy, Earth was not silent. On the human colony of New Carthage, shipyards glowed with activity. Sparks rained from great frames of steel as engineers worked day and night. The air was filled with the sound of welding, hammering, and the hum of engines being tested. Rows of ships stood in half-finished form, frigates, destroyers, and carriers. They were not as massive as the dreadnoughts of the Dominion, nor as sleek as the Velari cruisers. But they had something else, adaptability. Humans built their ships to change, to be modified, to be repaired with whatever parts were available. Admiral Rachel Kwan walked through the shipyard floor, her boots echoing on the steel. Her face was stern, but her eyes were sharp with determination. She had commanded fleets before, though never on this scale. Beside her walked Captain David Rios, one of her most trusted officers. "They still don't believe we will fight," David said quietly, watching a line of new pilots march past. "The council thinks we'll beg for protection." Rachel gave a short laugh without humor. "Let them believe it. The less they expect, the harder the surprise will strike." David frowned. "Do you think we can stand against the Dominion and the Collective? Their fleets outnumber us 10 to 1. Rachel paused, looking out at the massive skeleton of a carrier being assembled. "We don't need numbers. We need strategy. We've studied war longer than most of them realize. Humans don't want war, but when it comes to us, we learn fast. That is our strength." She turned to face him, her voice steady. "And when the galaxy finally sees it, they won't laugh anymore." Back in the council chamber, news reports filled the air. The Dominion had pushed its forces into neutral trade routes. Merchant convoys disappeared without warning. Colonies reported strange sightings, unidentified ships watching them from the edge of space. The Collective answered with raids of their own, striking Dominion outposts, seizing fuel depots. The war had begun, though no one wanted to say it out loud. Rallin, the Velari delegate, spoke urgently. "We must act now. If we wait, their conflict will consume half the galaxy. Entire systems will burn. We need a united defense." But Vornus, the silver-scaled Sereth, shook his head. "Why should we spill our blood for their hatred? Let the Dominion and the Collective destroy each other. We will survive," many others agreed. Their voices joined, arguing for neutrality. To them, war was a distant fire. They believed their worlds were safe. Elias Ward spoke only once during that meeting. His words were simple. Wars do not stay contained. Fire spreads, and when it spreads, it consumes more than its makers intend. But again, his words were dismissed. "They fear war," whispered the Talaran, always speaking of fire and ruin. "They have no will for battle." "They will not fight," agreed the Kirin. "When the storm comes, they will hide." The council believed itself wise. But outside, the storm was already reaching human space. The colony of Halcyon was the first to feel it. On a quiet night when its twin moons hung bright in the sky, sensors detected incoming ships. At first, the colony governor thought they were traitors, but as the signals grew clearer, the truth was revealed. Velari warships, black and sharp, sliding silently into orbit. The colony sent a distress call, but no help came. The Velari began their attack, raining fire on the defense satellites and silencing communications. People ran for shelters as the ground shook, yet the attackers expected no resistance. They thought humans would break easily, surrender quickly. They were wrong. The local militia fought back with every weapon they had. Small ships, ground batteries, even old fighters kept in storage. They could not defeat the Velari fleet, but they slowed it, bleeding time and resources. By the time the invaders withdrew, half their ships bore scars from human guns. The story spread quickly. Across human colonies, people heard the news. Humanity was under attack. And instead of despair, a new fire grew in their hearts. On Earth itself, the leaders of the United Human Federation met in the War Hall, a chamber deep beneath the capital city. Around the table sat admirals, generals, and scientists. On the walls glowed maps of the galaxy, marked with the growing battles between Dominion and Collective. President Alana Vera stood at the head of the table. Her voice was calm but strong. The Council will not act. They think we are weak. They think we fear war, but our colonies are under threat. We cannot wait for others to protect us. We will defend ourselves. Admiral Kwan saluted sharply. Our fleets are ready, Madam President. Not perfect, not countless, but ready. Give the order and we will fight. The President nodded slowly. Then the order is given. Protect our people. Hold the line. And remind the galaxy, humans may love peace, but we are not afraid of war. Meanwhile, in the quiet halls of the Council, Elias Ward received a message from Earth. He read it alone, then folded the datapad carefully. When he returned to the chamber, his expression was the same as always. Calm, unreadable. The delegates continued their endless debates, laughing sometimes at human silence. They believed nothing had changed, but Elias knew the truth. Beyond their eyes, human fleets were moving. Pilots climbed into cockpits, engineers sealed the last plates of armor, commanders studied maps with sharp eyes. Humanity was preparing not only to survive, but to prove a truth the galaxy had forgotten. They did not want war, but if war came to them, they would meet it with fire and resolve, and soon the galaxy would learn. The galaxy did not wait long for the first flames. The Zorath Dominion, proud and merciless, launched its opening strike with brutal strength. Their fleets descended on a Vehlari outpost near the rim, bombarding it with plasma storms until the world's surface cracked like glass. The Vehlari, furious, retaliated the next week by sending raiding parties deep into Dominion territory, burning supply stations and seizing resources. The war that the Council feared had begun. At first, the Council believed it would remain far away, contained between the two ancient enemies. But soon reports reached them that battles were spilling into neutral zones, trade lanes, colonies, and resource fields shared by many races. The fire was spreading just as Elias Ward had warned, and then the storm reached human space. The colony of Meridian was a thriving world, a hub of trade and culture. Its skies were bright with starships, its cities alive with markets and schools. Children played under the domes of crystal parks, and merchants spoke in a dozen alien languages. To the Dominion, it looked like an easy prize. One quiet morning, Dominion warships entered orbit without warning. They dropped from faster-than-light travel in formation, their hulls glowing red with energy. The defenders of Meridian were few, only a small garrison and a modest fleet of patrol ships. The Dominion expected them to surrender quickly. Instead, the humans resisted. Captain Elena Markov commanded the Meridian Defense Fleet. Her ships were smaller and weaker, but she refused to abandon the colony. She gave the order. Engage. The battle that followed was not like the Dominion expected. Human ships darted and weaved, striking fast and vanishing into asteroid fields. They laid mines in unexpected places, tricking Dominion cruisers into collisions. When outnumbered, they retreated just far enough to draw enemies into ambushes. The Dominion destroyed much that day, but they did not gain victory. By the time they withdrew, their fleet was damaged and humiliated. Hundreds of thousands of Meridian's people survived because their defenders refused to give up. The story of Meridian spread like wildfire. For the first time, the galaxy began to whisper. Perhaps humans are not as weak as we thought. In the Galactic Council chamber, the news was met with shock. Vornas, the silver-scaled Seraph delegate, slammed his hand on the table. Impossible. The Dominion does not retreat. They should have crushed that colony in a single strike. Rallin, the thoughtful Veari, spoke calmly. Perhaps the humans are not what we believed. The Talaran delegate shook her glowing head. They only survived by chance. Do not confuse luck with strength. But even as she spoke, more reports arrived. Other human colonies had been tested by raids, Veilari warships striking from the shadows, Dominion fleets seeking easy conquests. Each time the humans fought back with unexpected tactics. Sometimes they lost ships, sometimes they lost cities, but never did they collapse. Always they forced the enemy to bleed. The council grew restless. Their picture of humanity as a fragile race no longer matched the reality. And still Elias Ward said little. He sat quietly listening while others argued. But his silence carried more weight now. Some began to wonder what he knew that they did not. Far from the council, Admiral Rachel Kwan prepared her fleet. She stood on the bridge of the carrier Endurance, watching as her ships gathered in formation. Frigates, destroyers, cruisers, many of them newly built, some old and refitted, all crewed by men and women ready to fight. Her officers studied maps of the frontier, tracing the movements of enemy fleets. The Dominion relied on overwhelming firepower. The Veilari relied on stealth and precision. Both were powerful, but both also had weaknesses. Humans had studied them carefully. Rachel spoke to her commanders. We are not stronger than them, but we are faster to adapt. Every battle will teach us something. Every defeat will shape our next strategy. If they expect us to fight like them, they will fail. We will fight like humans. The officers nodded, determination in their eyes. They knew the risks. Many of them would not survive the coming battles, but none of them wavered. The first major clash came at the Kepler Corridor, a trade route critical for supplies. A Dominion fleet of 20 warships attempted to seize control. Waiting for them was Admiral Kwan's task force, only 10 ships strong. The Dominion commander laughed at the imbalance. Half their number? This will be quick. But the battle was not quick. The humans fought like no one else. They feigned retreats, drawing Dominion ships into narrow fields where asteroids became weapons. They used false signals to make their fleet appear larger, confusing enemy sensors. At one point, a single human frigate sacrificed itself by detonating its core near a Dominion cruiser, crippling the enemy ship and turning the tide of battle. By the end, the Dominion withdrew, stunned. They had lost 6 warships while humans lost only 3. News of the victory raced through the galaxy. For the first time, alien commanders began to fear human unpredictability. Back in the council chamber, arguments grew louder. We must support the humans, cried Rallin. They are holding the line where we would not. But others shook their heads. They are reckless, said the Kirin. They throw away lives for temporary victories. They cannot keep this up, said the Tilleran. Soon their strength will break. Through it all, Elias Ward finally rose to speak. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried through the chamber. You think we are afraid of war, he said. You think we cannot bear its weight. But you are wrong. We do not love war, but we have lived with it. We know its price better than any of you. That is why we fight as we do. Not for conquest, not for pride, but because we know what happens if we do not. The chamber fell silent. For the first time, many of the delegates looked at him with respect and unease. Meanwhile, on the frontier, the war spread wider. The Dominion struck again and again, only to find humans ready with new defenses. The Veilari tried stealth attacks, but humans countered with unexpected traps. Each time, the enemy left with fewer ships than they arrived. The galaxy was beginning to understand. Humanity was not afraid of war. Humanity had been forged by it, but the storm was far from over. Both the Dominion and the Collective were enraged by their failures. They began to prepare larger fleets, determined to crush this new enemy once and for all. And as Elias Ward watched the council grow uneasy, as Admiral Kwan studied her maps and prepared her forces, a single truth grew clear: the real war had only just begun. The galaxy was changing. Where once the Dominion and the Veilari had assumed easy victories, they now met a force that refused to be crushed. Humanity had begun to teach them a lesson they would never forget. The battles were no longer isolated skirmishes. Entire systems became stages for human ingenuity. Small fleets moved with incredible speed, striking at the heart of enemy supply lines and then vanishing into nebulae or asteroid belts. Alien commanders were frustrated. Every plan they devised was countered, every strategy anticipated. On the bridge of the Endurance, Admiral Rachel Kwan watched her tactical screens. The Dominion fleet advancing toward the Zorath cluster was massive, its ships gleaming with destructive power. Beside her, Commander Leo Tan studied the enemy formation. "They're confident," Leo said. "They think their numbers will overwhelm us." Rachel shook her head. "Confidence is their weakness. They expect us to fight like them. They do not know humans." She pointed to the holographic display. "We will split their fleet. Smaller, faster groups will draw them apart. Then we strike where they are weakest. We win not by force, but by choice." The officers nodded, and the fleet moved into position. The first human group jumped out of hyperspace near the edge of the Dominion fleet. Using precise maneuvers, they drew the enemy into a narrow corridor of space, cluttered with asteroids and debris from a destroyed planet. Dominion warships collided with hidden mines and were forced to slow down. Another human squadron struck at their communications, cutting off coordination between divisions. The Dominion, expecting a direct fight, found themselves confused, disorganized, and exposed. By the end of the first day, the human forces had damaged 6 cruisers and forced the fleet to retreat. The news traveled quickly. Across the galaxy, alien leaders began to whisper, "Humans are different. They are dangerous." Meanwhile, on the human homeworld, the war hall was alive with energy. President Alana Vera reviewed reports from across the frontier. Every victory, every clever maneuver, every human sacrifice had been noted. "They are learning fast," said Admiral Kwan, her voice steady. "Every time we fight, we become stronger." They, on the other hand, are slow to adapt. The president nodded. "Humans are not reckless. They are precise. Each loss teaches us something. That is why we survive when they expect us to fail." At that moment, a young strategist named Lila Chen spoke up. "Madam President, the Dominion and Velari may still join forces. If they coordinate, our fleets may face overwhelming numbers." Alana considered this. "Then we will be ready. We will fight together. Every fleet, every colony, every pilot will act as one. Unity is our greatest weapon." Back in the council chamber, delegates could no longer ignore the reports. The humans, "They are adapting faster than expected," admitted Rallin. "They are not weak, they are formidable." Vorna, still stubborn, frowned. "Perhaps it is a fluke. 1 or 2 victories do not make a race strong." "But their strategy is clear," said Rallin. "They are learning from each encounter. Each time the Dominion or Velari strike, humans respond in ways no one predicted. They are not only surviving, they are winning." The Teleron delegates' glowing eyes narrowed. "They fight like a single organism. Coordination, foresight, patience. This is not fear. This is mastery." Even the council began to realize a difficult truth. Humanity did not crave war, but when forced, humans could turn the tide against much stronger enemies. In space, the turning tide became more apparent. A joint Dominion-Velari force attempted to trap human fleets near the Xylan Nebula. They assumed the humans would panic, scatter, or surrender. Instead, the humans used the nebula to their advantage. Its dense gases interfered with sensors, hiding the movements of small attack squads. Human ships darted between clouds of gas, hitting supply vessels and ambushing enemy frigates. When the larger ships tried to pursue, they became entangled in debris and traps. Human pilots communicated silently, using coordinated signals that allowed them to strike simultaneously from multiple directions. By the end of the battle, the joint fleet suffered heavy losses, while human losses were minimal. Alien commanders were furious. They had underestimated the humans again and again. On the ground, human colonies also became centers of resistance. Engineers converted factories into military outposts. Civilians trained as scouts and communication experts. Even children were taught evacuation procedures, first aid, and how to support fleets from local stations. Every citizen became part of the defense not by choice alone, but because they understood the stakes. The Dominion and Velari were not used to this. In their empires, civilians were often ignored or evacuated, left behind while soldiers fought. But humans integrated every resource, every mind, every hand into the effort. This was another reason why human resistance seemed unstoppable. As victories accumulated, confidence grew within the human forces. Yet Admiral Kwan remained cautious. "Pride is dangerous," she reminded her officers. "We fight not because we are invincible, but because we are prepared. Never underestimate the enemy. Never overestimate yourself." Her words resonated. Every officer and pilot understood the balance between bravery and wisdom. They were not reckless heroes, they were humans defending their people, learning from every encounter, improving with each engagement. The Council, now forced to watch the humans' progress closely, called for an emergency session. Alien delegates gathered, their previous assumptions crumbling. Rallin spoke first. We misjudged them. We believed humans feared war. We believed they would crumble under pressure. But what we see is different. They do not love war, but they understand it deeply. Their knowledge of strategy, sacrifice, and adaptation is unparalleled, Vornas growled. They are still only one species. The Dominion and Villari have fleets 10 times larger. Yes, Rallin admitted, but the humans are not fighting like others. They strike where they are needed, retreat when necessary, and learn faster than any opponent. Their intelligence and coordination give them an advantage that numbers alone cannot match. Even the Teleran, who had once laughed at humans, nodded reluctantly. It seems they have mastered the art of war in ways we did not expect, not because they seek it, but because they must survive. Back in space, human fleets continued their operations. At the Valar Expanse, a Dominion cruiser squadron attempted to ambush a convoy carrying food and medicine to human colonies. Human forces, anticipating this, positioned themselves among the rings of a gas giant. The enemy fell into the trap. Mines detonated, sending ships spinning into the planet's atmosphere. Small attack squads struck from multiple angles, crippling cruisers before the main fleet could respond. The convoy passed safely. The humans had won without losing a single transport ship. Reports of these victories reached the Council. Shock, respect, and even fear spread through alien ranks. On Earth, President Vera received the news. She stood before the war hall, listening to updates from every front. Humans were winning battles that seemed impossible. Colonies survived attacks that should have crushed them. Fleets moved with skill and intelligence. She turned to Admiral Quan. The galaxy will remember this. They will see humanity not as fragile, but as a force to be reckoned with. Quan nodded. Let them see. Let them understand that humans do not fear war, not because we love it, but because we are willing to face it to protect what matters. And across the stars, in every corner of the galaxy, whispers began to spread among alien fleets and commanders. Humans are not afraid. Humans are different. Humans are dangerous. The turning tide was clear. Humanity, once underestimated, was no longer just surviving. It was reshaping the galaxy's understanding of strength, courage, and the true meaning of war. And still, the storm was not over. There were battles ahead, far greater than those already fought. But one thing had become undeniable. The galaxy would never view humanity the same way again. The Galactic Council chamber was unusually quiet. Delegates from dozens of worlds sat stiffly in their seats, their expressions grim. News of human victories had spread faster than any fleet could travel. Reports arrived from every sector, human fleets pushing back the Dominion, clever strategies outwitting Villari forces, colonies holding under siege, and supply lines secured against all odds. For weeks, the galaxy had watched in disbelief as humans turned the tide of what was expected to be a one-sided war. Rallin, the Villari delegate, rose first. His voice was calm but carried authority. We believed humanity was weak. We believed they feared war. But the evidence is undeniable. They are not only surviving, they are leading the defense of countless systems. Vornas, still silver-scaled and proud, slammed a claw on the table. It cannot be. One species cannot fight against 2 empires and survive. They are small, inexperienced, and yet, somehow they prevail. The Talaran delegate's eyes glowed faintly. It is not luck. It is strategy, courage, and unity. They fight not for glory, not for conquest, but for survival, and they do it together. Elias Ward rose from his seat. His voice was calm, measured, yet carried a weight that silenced the chamber. You are correct, he said. Humans do not crave war. We do not enjoy the destruction it brings. But we have lived with the lessons of conflict for thousands of years. Peace is precious to us because we understand the cost of losing it. That is why we fight, not because we want war, but because we must protect what we love. Murmurs ran through the council. Some delegates looked ashamed. Some looked surprised. A few were afraid, realizing how badly they had misjudged humanity. Far from the council, in the heart of human space, Admiral Rachel Quan watched the progress of the fleets. Human forces had secured several contested systems and pushed enemy fleets back toward their own territories. Captain David Rios reported from a forward station. Admiral, the Dominion is retreating in several sectors. Villari forces are reorganizing, and their attacks are less coordinated. It seems the tide has truly turned. Rachel nodded. It is not just about firepower. They do not expect us to fight the way we do. We adapt, we learn, and we coordinate in ways no other species does. That is our strength. She looked out of the bridge window at the stars, lit with the glow of countless human ships. The galaxy will remember this moment, she whispered. They will know that humans are not fragile. They are formidable. The council, meanwhile, struggled to come to terms with the reality they had ignored for so long. Fornus finally spoke, voice heavy with frustration and respect. We underestimated them. Every assumption we held about humans was wrong. They are not afraid, not weak, not naive. They are masters of adaptation and strategy. Rallin nodded. And that is why they succeed. They do not seek war, but when faced with it, they rise above expectations. They fight for peace, for their people, and that makes them stronger than any empire that fights for conquest alone. Even the Teleran, who had once mocked humanity, admitted quietly, they have earned our respect, perhaps even our caution. Elias remained calm, listening to their words, but inside he felt no triumph. Humans had not fought for glory. They had fought to protect life, and that responsibility weighed heavily on every human commander, every pilot, every citizen. In space, the final confrontation of the war approached. The Dominion and Velari, realizing the humans were far more dangerous than they expected, combined their fleets for a decisive strike. Hundreds of ships gathered near the Korath expanse, preparing to crush the human defense once and for all. But the humans had anticipated this. Admiral Kwan organized her fleet in ways the enemy could not predict. Smaller squadrons positioned themselves in hidden sectors, using asteroid fields, gas clouds, and space debris as cover. Human engineers had developed electronic countermeasures that masked ship movements and created false signals to confuse enemy sensors. Every human pilot and crew member understood their role. Every decision was made with precision. Every movement was coordinated across multiple systems. The battle began with a sudden strike from a small human squadron. They disrupted the enemy's supply lines and disabled critical communication relays. The Dominion and Velari fleets responded, but by then, human ambushes had begun to strike from multiple angles. The fight was intense. Dominion warships fired massive plasma cannons, tearing through asteroid fields. Velari stealth ships darted like shadows, trying to ambush human cruisers. But humans adapted. Mines were deployed where the Velari least expected. Decoys drew the largest Dominion ships away from vulnerable systems. Smaller human frigates darted in and out, striking where they were most effective. Captain Elena Markov led one squadron through a nebula, using its interference to cloak their movements. With a single coordinated strike, they crippled a Velari battleship and forced the surrounding fleet into retreat. Another human task force, led by Commander Leo Tan, sacrificed a single ship to destroy a Dominion dreadnought. It was a calculated loss executed flawlessly, saving countless other lives. The enemy fleets, despite their numbers and firepower, could not overcome human strategy. Every plan was countered, every expectation broken. By the end of the confrontation, the combined Dominion-Velari force had suffered enormous losses and was forced to withdraw. Back in the council chamber, the silence was profound. Rallin spoke first, voice trembling with awe. They have done it. They have survived what no one thought possible. They have turned the tide. Fornus bowed his head, uncharacteristically humble. We judge them wrongly. The humans, they are not afraid of war. They are extraordinary. The Talaran delegate added quietly. They fight not for conquest, not for glory, but because they understand the cost of failure. That is why they are stronger than any of us assumed. Elias Ward stood looking across the chamber. His calm demeanor never faltered, but his voice carried the weight of truth. You see us now, he said. You see that humans do not fear war. You also see that we do not love it. But we understand it. And that understanding allows us to protect life when others would destroy it. This is our gift and our responsibility. The chamber fell silent once more. Every delegate understood that humanity had changed the galaxy's perception of strength, courage, and wisdom. On Earth, the celebration was quiet but profound. Citizens of the human worlds gathered in public squares, watching transmissions from the front lines. Pilots returned from battle, weary but proud. Engineers and medics received applause. Leaders, soldiers, and civilians alike understood that their combined effort had changed the course of history. President Vera addressed the people from the war hall. We did not fight for conquest. We fought for life, for our families, and for peace. We showed the galaxy that humanity is not fragile. We are resilient, adaptable, and united, and we will always protect those we care for no matter the challenge. Cheering erupted across human space. But amid the joy, there was solemn understanding. Peace had been bought with great effort, and the work to preserve it would continue. The galaxy had learned a lesson it would never forget. Humans were not weak. Humans were not afraid. Humans fought not because they desired war, but because they understood it, and because they valued life more than victory alone. The Galactic Council had been humbled. They had misjudged an entire species, and now humanity's reputation as a force of courage, intelligence, and resilience was cemented across the stars. Elias Ward, standing quietly in the council chamber, allowed himself a small smile. "They finally understand," he whispered. And in every human colony, on every ship, in every city and space station, that understanding resonated. Humans were not fragile. Humans were strong, and the galaxy would never underestimate them again. The war was far from over in the wider galaxy, but one undeniable truth remained. Humans had proven themselves guardians of peace, masters of strategy, and unafraid of the storms they had survived. The stars seemed a little brighter that night, and humanity's place among them had been forever secured. The great hall of the Galactic Council was alive with color, sound, and tension. Lights from dozens of alien worlds glowed across the chamber, reflecting against polished crystal walls. Delegates of different species filled the seats in a circle, each one trying to look more important than the other. Some spoke loudly with booming voices. Others moved their many limbs in dramatic gestures. The room was never truly silent because each species wanted to show its power, its knowledge, or its pride. Among them sat Alara, the youngest envoy of the Lyrians. Her people were not the strongest or the richest, but they had been invited into the council to keep balance between greater powers. She felt small in the giant chamber, almost invisible. The Lyrians had tall, graceful forms, their skin shining with faint silver patterns. Yet even her natural beauty did not make her feel secure in that sea of intimidating presences. Her task was simple on paper: to watch, to listen, and to carry news back to her leaders. But every time someone looked her way, she felt the weight of her people's future pressing down on her. She feared making even a small mistake because here a wrong word could lead to war. It was during one of these long meetings that Alara noticed the human. He sat far back, away from the loud voices and the heated arguments. His name, she later learned, was Daniel Hale, though he never introduced himself loudly or demanded attention. He was an ordinary man in appearance, with dark hair cut short and simple clothing that looked plain next to the ceremonial robes of other envoys. His eyes were calm, almost distant, like a person who had seen much but chose to speak little. At first, Alara thought he was only a guard or a servant who had entered by mistake. Humans were still a relatively new species to the council. Many of the elder races looked down on them as inexperienced, fragile, and impulsive. She had heard the whispers. They are children in a room of giants. But this man was not a guard. His badge carried the mark of Earth's delegation. He was a representative, even though he did not act like one. While others raised their voices, Daniel sat quietly. While others fought over words, he made no sound. He carried a small notepad, something almost no one else used in an age of glowing screens, and he simply wrote from time to time. His silence was unusual in a place where silence meant weakness. Alara found herself stealing glances at him throughout the meeting. It bothered her at first. Why would someone come all this way across the stars just to sit in silence? Did he not care about what was being decided? Did his people send him here only to fill a seat? The meeting dragged on for hours. Voices clashed like weapons. Two delegations nearly came to blows. Ilara's head ached from the noise. When the recess bell finally rang, she almost collapsed into her chair. Around her, groups of envoys gathered to continue their arguments in smaller circles. She felt trapped. If she joined one group, she would anger the others. If she walked away, she would appear weak. Her heart pounded as she tried to decide what to do. Then, without a word, Daniel walked across the hall. He did not look at anyone else. He did not greet or bow. He simply came and sat down in the empty seat next to Alara. For a long moment, he said nothing. He only opened his notepad, wrote a few lines, and then rested his hands calmly on the table. Alara stared at him in disbelief. Did he not realize how strange that was? Sitting next to another envoy without invitation could be seen as disrespectful. She waited for him to speak, to explain himself. But he remained silent. At first, his silence made her uncomfortable. She shifted in her seat, unsure how to react. She thought of asking why he was there, but somehow the words caught in her throat. There was nothing threatening in his presence. No heavy stare, no judgment in his eyes. He simply was there. Slowly, something unexpected happened. The noise of the council, the buzzing of voices, the pressure on her shoulders, it all seemed less sharp, less heavy. She felt calmer, though she could not explain why. Finally, she whispered, "Why are you sitting here?" Daniel looked at her with a small, almost apologetic smile. His voice was quiet, warm, and steady when he answered. "Because it looked like you could use someone on your side." Alara blinked. No one had ever said that to her before. She wanted to laugh, but the words touched something inside her. She thought of all the times she had stood in this chamber, feeling alone among giants. Could this simple man, with his silence and his notepad, really make her feel less invisible? Before she could answer, the meeting resumed. Delegates shouted again, each trying to push their view forward. Once more, Daniel did not join the noise. He listened, he wrote, and he sat beside her, unshaken by the storm of words. For the rest of the session, Alara found herself calmer. She was still nervous, still uncertain. But whenever she felt the pressure building, she looked at the silent human next to her and remembered his words. Someone on your side. By the end of the day, she realized something very strange. The human had not spoken more than a handful of words. He had not defended her people, argued her case, or stood against the louder envoys. And yet, when she rose to leave the chamber, she no longer felt so small. She no longer felt so alone. As she walked back to her quarters, her thoughts spun. Who was this Daniel Hale? Why had his quiet presence comforted her more than the many promises of other leaders? That night, as she looked out at the stars from her window, she found herself whispering into the silence. Why does his silence feel stronger than their speeches?